it has been read. These are all wanton acts in the deepest religious sense and therefore harmful to our spiritual progress. For this reason they are roundly condemned. Following the morning meal. Most monasteries and temples schedule samu, which during session takes the form of sweeping, dusting, scrubbing the floors and toilets, sweeping the walks, raking leaves, weeding the gardens, and working in the kitchen. Since the time when Huaihai first instituted it, more than 1,000 years ago, manual labor has been an essential ingredient of Zen discipline. It is recorded of Huaihai that one day his monks, feeling he had grown too feeble to work, hid his gardening tools. When they refused to heed his entreaties to return them, he stopped eating, saying, "No work, no eating." The same spirit was expressed in modern times by Jempo Yamamoto Roshi, former abbot of Ryutakuji, who died in June at the age of 96. Almost blind and no longer able to teach or work about the monastery, he decided it was time to die, so he stopped eating. When asked by his monks why he refused his food, he replied that he had outlived his usefulness and was only a bother to everybody. They told him, "If you die now, January, when it is so cold, everybody will be uncomfortable at your funeral and you will be an even greater nuisance, so please eat." He thereupon resumed eating, but when it became warm he again stopped, and not long after quietly toppled over and died. What is the significance of such work in terms of Zen training? First, it points up that Zazen is not merely a matter of acquiring the ability to concentrate and focus the mind during sitting, but that in the widest sense Zazen involves the mobilization and dynamic utilization of Joriki in our every act. Samu, as a mobile type of Zazen, also provides the opportunity to quiet, deepen, and bring the mind to one-pointedness through activity, as well as to invigorate the body and thereby energize the mind. The object here, as in every other type of Zazen, is the cultivation first of mindfulness and eventually mindlessness. These are simply two different degrees of absorption. Mindfulness is a state wherein one is totally aware in any situation and so always able to respond appropriately. Yet one is aware that one is aware. Mindlessness, on the other hand, or no-mindness, as it has been called, is a condition of such complete absorption that there is no vestige of self-awareness. Any action arising from these states of mind can be neither rushed nor desultory, neither strained nor lax, can have no false movements nor waste any energy. All labor entered into with such a mind is valued for itself apart from what it may lead to. This is the meritless, or purposeless, work of Zen. By undertaking each task in this spirit, eventually we are enabled to grasp the truth that every act is an expression of the Buddha mind. Once this is directly and unmistakably experienced, no labor can be beneath one's dignity. On the contrary, all work, no matter how menial, is ennobling because it is seen as the expression of the immaculate Buddha nature. This is true enlightenment, and enlightenment in Zen is never for oneself alone but for the sake of all. This ideal is stressed throughout session. 4 times a day in fact. At the close of the formal lecture, at the end of sutra chanting in the morning and in the afternoon, and the last thing in the evening. The 4 vows are recited 3 times in unison. All beings, without number, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions I vow to uproot. Dharma gates, without number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha I vow to attain. Samu finished, there follows a formal talk of about an hour's length. An example of which is to be found in section E. Then, around 11, comes the main meal of the day, usually white rice mixed with barley and supplemented by fresh vegetables and soybean paste soup. After lunch all but the most ardent, who continue to sit in the zendo, relax for an hour, as provided by the session schedule, not forgetting, however, to absorb themselves in their koan or other exercise. With the exception of the talk and manual work, the afternoon and evening are a repetition of the morning timetable. Some monasteries and temples allow a hot bath in the afternoon or evening, and for beginners with aching legs and strained bodies this relief is inexpressibly welcome. At 4 in the afternoon a light repast, mainly made up of leftovers from the midday meal, is served. Unlike the first two meals, which are preceded by and end with chanting, this medicine is consumed in complete silence. At Hosshin-ji, noted for its strict session, on the fourth night and every night thereafter, beginning at 8, there is a unique discipline for combating the seductive visions of sleep which begin to tug at the fatigued, faltering mind at this hour. With the clang of the large zendo bell there is a sudden outburst of mewing by all who are striving with this koan. At first weak and uncertain, this groundswell gathers depth, force, and momentum under the energetic prodding of the free-swinging kaisaku of the Godo and the Godo's aides, who shout. Voice mew from the hara, not from the throat. When these cries of mew reach a crescendo of deep bellows, as they eventually do, suddenly they are turned off by the clanging of the same bell, usually about 30 minutes later. Now silent zazen resumes, but the air has become electric. Zazen ends at 8:45 and the final chanting of the day follows, a short sutra and the 4 vows, now recited with passionate intensity. With bodies and minds now bursting with energy. Sleep is out of the question and practically all participants file out of the zendo into the cool night air with their sitting cushions under their arms. Instead of wearily shuffling off to bed as on previous nights, each resolutely strides off to a solitary spot, often the monastery cemetery, there to continue with zazen far into the night. Particularly on the last night of a session. With the shouting and clouting fiercest. None but the obviously ill or palpably timid would dare retire to bed at 9 when virtually the entire zendo has taken up quarters for the night in the cemetery and nearby hills, rending the still air with desperate cries of mew. And during the severest yearly session, the Rohatsu, in December, which commemorates the Buddha's enlightenment, Yaza is the rule each night. The last day of session, especially if it has been preceded by all-night zazen, tends to become anticlimactic. The Roshi therefore admonishes everyone that this is the most critical day of all and that to relax now when the mind has reached its peak of concentration is in effect to throw away 6 days of solid effort. On this 7th day the kaisaku and its companion shouting are dispensed with. As though the Godo were saying, I can do no more, it is now entirely up to you. And after 6 days of periodic commotion this day of silent yet dynamic zazen is frequently the most rewarding. Before the formal close of a session the Roshi, addressing everyone, will say in effect, a sincere effort at session is never wasted even though it does not terminate in enlightenment. Getting kensho can be compared to a person's hitting the bullseye on the 100th shot. Who can say that the 99 misses are unrelated to the final success? Some have come to enlightenment even during the drinking of tea which ends the session and others on the train going home, so remain attentive at all times. Concentrate unremittingly on your koan if that is your practice, or if you are doing shikantaza, perform every task single-mindedly. Don't fritter away the joriki you have accumulated during session in vain, empty talk, but conserve and strengthen it through all your daily tasks. In some monasteries and temples a special ceremony is held, in the presence of all participants, to permit those who have attained kensho to express their gratitude to the Roshi and the head monks. The session formally ends with the chanting of the Hanya Shingyo and the 4 vows. Afterward all join once more in drinking tea and eating cake to thank the Roshi and the head monks as well as each other for the aid and support received during the session. In spite of the vigorous use of the kaisaku, the scrambling to dokusan, and the lively exchanges which often occur in dokusan itself, the real drama of a session lies in the hours of zazen. in the solitary search into the vast world of one's own mind, in the lonely trek through winding canyons of shame and fear, across deserts of weariness and doubt, around volcanoes of pride, and through jungles of confusion. Session is a ceaseless struggle to reach that transparency of mind which ultimately leads to the wondrous discovery that the universe and oneself are not remote and apart but an intimate, palpitating whole. Whether awakening follows or not, one cannot seriously participate in a session and not return home chastened in heart, strengthened in mind, and with a startlingly fresh vision of an old familiar world. The central theme of session is sustained self-effort. For in the last analysis one is liberated not by one's fellow practitioners, not by one's teacher, not even by the Buddha, and certainly not by any supernatural being, but by one's own unfaltering, indefatigable exertions. In Zen's emphasis on self-reliance, in its clear awareness of the dangers of intellectualism, in its empirical appeal to personal experience and not philosophic speculation as the means of verifying ultimate truth, in its pragmatic concern with mind and suffering, and in its direct, practical methods for body-mind emancipation, Westerners will find much that is congenial to their temperament and Weltanschauung. At a time when things are in the saddle and riding mankind, as never before, when the tensions of fear, anxiety, and estrangement are devastating the minds of modern men and women, the fact that ordinary people through enlightenment can discover meaning and joy in life, as well as a sense of their own uniqueness and solidarity with all existence, surely spells hope for human beings everywhere. The experiences. Mr. K.Y., a Japanese executive, age November, Dear Nakagawa Roshi.